The Denver Center for the Performing Arts, Off-Center, and the Museum of Contemporary Art Denver present Mixed Taste, tag team lectures on unrelated topics. And now, introducing tonight's unlikely pairing, Rage, Philanthropy, and Apples. Please welcome tonight's host, Charlie Miller.
Hello, welcome to Mixed Taste 2021. My name is Charlie Miller. I am the curator of Off-Center here at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. And it is so amazing to be in front of a live audience for the first time in I don't know how long. So welcome. Thank you all for being here. I will be hosting this summer along with my friend and colleague Sarah Bai, who's co-producer of Mixed Taste. She'll be here next week. I'll be the week after. You'll get to see both of us. It'll be great. We're really excited as well that this year you can experience Mixed Taste in the flesh in the Seawell Ballroom here and online at home on demand. So that's one of the great things, one of the few great things that came out of COVID is now you can have Mixed Taste wherever you are, whenever you want it. So welcome to those who are watching online. Welcome to those who are here in person. If you're here in person, the bar is open all night. Feel free to help yourself and get a drink. And I recommend the drink special, which is inspired by tonight's themes. It is called Apples Are All the Rage. So check out the drink. Mel and the Epicurean team have done a great job, and I recommend it. This is the 17th year of Mixed Taste, and we're really excited to be here in the Seawell Ballroom and partnering with MCA Denver again to make it happen. So in order to allow viewers here in the ballroom and online to both participate in Mixed Taste, we have a cool second screen experience, and I want to make sure you all are comfortable with chatting and polling so that we can have fun together on our second screen. So go to the QR code that you'll see on the screen here. If you don't know how to scan a QR code, open your camera, zoom in on that image, and click on the tab that pops up when your phone recognizes the image. Everyone doing that? If this isn't working for you, you can also go to slido.com and enter the code MIXEDTASTE, all one word. Now you should be at a website with 3 tabs. The Ideas chat, that's where you can comment and chat throughout the show. You can take polls, and you can submit questions for the Q&A. So let's take a quick poll to try it out. I noticed some of you have already done it. We're asking you, if you were an apple, what type would you be? Pink Lady, Granny Smith, Crab Apple, or Golden Delicious? So you can see, you can vote on your phones. We can see the results in real time. Pink Lady has taken a commanding lead at 39%. Granny Smith is competing with Crab Apple here for the last place. Honeycrisp happens to be my favorite as well. We left that one out. So you get the poll. We'll do one of those a little bit later. Now let's switch over to the chat, which is the Ideas tab. And to practice that, please type in a word that describes how excited you are for Mixed Taste this summer. Let's see. Oh, hello. Woohoo. So as you'll see, you can type in something to remember that I'll remind you again. If you want to win a prize at the Q&A, you need to enter your name in here so we know who you are. But right now, you can be anonymous. Feel free to be anonymous as you'd like. Gassy, ooh. All right, well, I am very excited, and let's get this show on the road. So for those who don't know, Mixed Taste is a mashup series where we bring together 2 experts who each present on different topics, and then we have a live question and answer session on both topics at the same time. The rules are very simple. The first speaker talks for 20 minutes, then the second person talks for another 20 minutes on a completely unrelated topic. No connections are allowed to be made between the two until the Q&A, when we answer questions on both topics at the same time and anything can happen. Between talks tonight, we'll play a quick game, take a little break, and we will conclude the night with a local poet creating an original poem inspired by what we learned tonight. It's going to be really fun. Glad you're all here. Again, feel free to get up as you need if you're here in the ballroom, and at home, you can always push pause if you want. Go do what you need to do and come back and watch us later. So let's get started and introduce our first speaker, who will be talking about rage philanthropy. Melanie Sidwell is a PhD student who is curious about the intersection of media, activism, and philanthropy. At the University of Colorado Boulder, she is a member of the Philanthropic Informatics Lab, where she is researching the phenomenon known as rage philanthropy. Please welcome Melanie Sidwell.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Charlie, for that warm welcome. So my name's Melanie, and I'm really curious about the intersection of media, philanthropy, and activism. And today, I'm going to talk about my research paper on the organizational experience of rage philanthropy. Let's see. Oops. This paper was co-authored with Dr. Amy Voida from CU Boulder and Sarah Natha from Indiana University. And our paper is focused on nonprofit organizations and how they experience a specific type of charitable giving. This talk was originally intended for a nonprofit and fundraising audience at a conference scheduled for March of 2020. So as you can imagine, that did not happen. And so I'm completely thrilled to share this work with you tonight. And as you listen, I encourage you to consider how technology is blurring the lines between activism, media, and philanthropy. So first, I'll provide a little bit of background information on how I got to this topic, and then dive into the research on rage philanthropy itself, if you're not familiar with that term, and then close up with what's next in terms of questions and future research. So to begin, this is Steve and Laurie. They are generous donors to the University of Colorado, Denver, and I think they're amazing. For the last 6 years, I worked for CU in donor communications, and I would interview and write about people like Steve and Laurie and their decision to donate to their passions. For this couple, it was scholarships for first-generation college students. And it was during my interview that Steve said something really interesting. He said that philanthropy can be many things to people: an act of goodwill, a tenet of one's faith, a way to leave a family legacy, a financially savvy decision, or even an act of protest. And it was these last words, philanthropy as an act of protest, that just hung in the air for me, and I've been studying what this means ever since. So donations from living individuals account for over 2/3 of all charitable giving, and it is us, the donating public, who are responsible for the majority of annual philanthropic contributions in the United States. And it's no surprise. Numerous studies show that charitable giving makes us happier, healthier, and more social by evoking feelings of gratitude and connection to each other. So what happens then when charitable giving, which is supposed to be joyful, or at the very least unassuming, is paired with a negatively framed emotion like anger? It turns out this is a thing called rage philanthropy, and here are some examples you may have read about or even participated in. So just 10 days after the 2016 US presidential election, the now defunct website ragedonate.com served as an outlet of catharsis and collective action. It paired incendiary quotes from President-elect Donald Trump and nonprofits whose constituents he targeted, like Muslims, women, immigrants, people with disabilities, etc. A Mashable news article about the website popularized the term Rage Donate, and since then, media articles and trade publications have used rage philanthropy to describe these giving surges to nonprofits. So here's a classic example. The online TV show, The Lady Brain, posted this image on its Facebook page in 2016, urging folks to donate to Planned Parenthood in Mike Pence's name. By doing so, the vice president-elect would receive a thank you note from Planned Parenthood, the women's reproduction rights nonprofit he was threatening to defund. So in the month after the 2016 election, 46,000 donations were made in his name, according to the organization. That's 46,000 thank you notes. Celebrities like Amy Schumer and Mila Kunis also tweeted about making these rage donations, and Planned Parenthood even used this tactic in its donor communications. According to Charity Navigator, a website that ranks nonprofit performance, the first 100 days of the Trump administration changed a pattern in charitable donations, as you can see from this chart here. More than 10 million people visited the website during that time to read the ratings and evaluations of charities before making their donations. While the term rage philanthropy entered our lexicon in 2016, this giving behavior existed beforehand, even though it might not have been called as such. For example, in 2011, a US comedian donated money to a gay men's health nonprofit to counter-protest a Westboro Baptist Church demonstration outside her show. And in 2014, a Germantown took a, quote, clever and creative approach. For every step taken by a neo-Nazi member in the march, the town donated to a nonprofit dedicated to helping people escape these kinds of hate groups. To be clear, rage giving can happen to any organization, not just liberal or progressive causes, and not just organizations with a lot of staff and resources and history. Anybody. Remember this 2019 viral moment between a high school teen and a tribal elder in Washington, D.C.? Supporters of the teen created a GoFundMe page to support both a pro-life nonprofit as well as cover the legal, PR, and other costs associated with the teen's multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit. So, yet little is known about how rage philanthropy events like this are experienced by and ultimately impact nonprofits. So our paper conducts exploratory research that is guided by the following question: in what ways does rage philanthropy affect nonprofits? Over the course of 1 year, I conducted interviews with 20 informants from 17 different organizations, and they worked in a variety of roles within their organization. Each interview began with the same prompt: describe the most recent time that your organization experienced a fundraising activity that seemed to be associated with acts of protest or activism. And across our analysis, we found that these rage-giving events shared 4 common characteristics: unexpected, unknown, emotional, and unsolicited. First, unexpected. The majority of our informants said they did not anticipate the rage philanthropy event, even though the controversy that ignited the sudden giving surge was largely publicized and related to their work. It was only during the first 24 to 48 hours, described by some as a moment or window, did our informants say they realized something uncommon was occurring at their organization. Informants also described the sudden increase in donations and media attention as a blip, swing, momentum, bump, spike, and flood. Second, unknown. Informants often did not know who these new donors were or how they found their organization. Despite extensive media coverage about the controversy and ensuing philanthropy, the majority reported that they were simply unable to link or identify a specific single news story or website to the sudden giving surge because of the nature of today's media landscape. Only one informant, P12, said his organization tracks which media outlets and types of media that their donors consume. When asked how they believed donors might have found their nonprofit, informants guessed Google, and others credited Charity Navigator and GuideStar, another website that ranks the performance of nonprofits. Next, we have emotional. The majority of informants commented on the intense emotional charge of rage philanthropy events. For example, one informant said that it appeared some donors preferred to wallow in the horror of an upsetting news story rather than learn about the work. Informants also shared that donor emotions influenced those of staff. Informants reported that they and their colleagues felt anxiety, frustration, pressure, uncertainty, as well as empowerment and invalidation during a rage philanthropy event. P19, for example, called his experience frightening and strange, while others said that they found comments that accompanied donations encouraging and even humorous. Finally, unsolicited. All of the informants in our study experienced giving to their organization that was unsolicited. That is, the ask for donations did not originate within the organization's strategic planning, active fundraising, or engagement campaigns. In addition to money, informants reported the return of past donors who started to give again, increased donor retention 2 years after the event, an uptick in internship and volunteer applications, as well as a dramatic increase in their Facebook likes. So while Rage Philanthropy brought increases in revenue and public awareness to nonprofit organizations and causes, it also frequently disrupted their processes, revealed systematic strengths and limitations, and brought into question operational truths about fundraising and nonprofit work. So 2 questions emerged from our analysis. 1, to whom should our organization be beholden? And 2, how should our organization respond when its work and purpose are politicized? So let's take a closer look. So in terms of question 1, nonprofit organizations have multiple stakeholders: donors, board members, volunteers, staff, clients, the mission of the organization itself, and each carry a level of influence and power over the organization's decisions. And almost all of the informants in our study reported that their organization faced challenges deciding which of these stakeholders to privilege in their response to the Rage Philanthropy event. In terms of question 2, all of the informants in our study noted the increasing politicization of their work and purpose, yet they lacked consensus on how to respond to these external pressures. So moving iteratively between our data and the research literature, we found that these 2 questions resonated with the foundational work of scholar Peter Frumkin, who writes about the 4 functions or roles of nonprofits in society. The question, to whom should our organization be beholden, falls along the horizontal axis here, describing a demand and supply orientation. That is, who do we privilege? Is it the clients who are often disadvantaged and therefore need nonprofit services? Or the donors, volunteers, and social entrepreneurs who supply the ideas and resources? The second question, how should our organization respond when its work and purpose are politicized, falls along the vertical axis. The instrumental rationale means that the value of nonprofit work is derived from concrete outcomes like job training, the celebration of the arts, shelter for those who are experiencing homelessness, so on. Or the expressive rationale, which means that the value of nonprofit work is derived from being an outlet for individuals to express themselves, regardless if the outcome is achieved. So before the Rage event, the experiences of our informants suggest that the service delivery role here was predominantly where they saw their organizations and where they were the most comfortable. And this is a typical viewpoint of nonprofits in society. We have clients who need services, and we aim to achieve that outcome. But the experience of Rage Philanthropy stretched the organizations in our study into unscripted and unfamiliar functions. And it was external pressures like these that are pushing nonprofits in ways that shift them from one quadrant to another. And some are embracing this shift, while other nonprofits are experiencing this as a kind of organizational crisis. For example, P14 said, yeah, we have 2 audiences. We have our donors, and then we have our clients, and I can't even tell you, we talk about this every single day. At what point would we turn down a $30,000 donation from a donor because his viewpoints are just completely off, you know? Next, P7 said, it's a tricky balance. In my head, I'm always thinking we're nonpartisan, and then this huge event happens that sort of catapults our revenue stream, and it becomes, even though we're nonpartisan, the nature of what we do is political. And finally, P19 called Rage donations a way for people to convey, quote, partly an ideological thing of who I am, what do I stand for, What do I want to give to? And what's the kind of person I want to be? So these unique giving surges continued after the 2019 conclusion of our empirical work. For example, here we have the outdoor retailer Patagonia, which wrote in its 2019 Holiday Marketing and Giving Tuesday campaign to encourage folks to donate and include those relatives and friends who, quote, refuse to believe in climate science. In 2020, racial justice groups across the US reported receiving tens of millions of dollars in donations, particularly for community bail funds posting bond for protesters arrested in demonstrations. And earlier this year, the GoFundMe site set up for a grandmother who was injured in a racially motivated attack received nearly $1 million to help with her medical bills. However, news articles reported that she plans to donate the funds to the Asian American community to help fight racism. So this is how I feel on the inside when I talk about this, so thank you for listening. Our exploratory first study was really trying to make sense of what's going on with Rage Philanthropy and how does it relate conceptually to other things that it might have been studied and how does it differ? So for example, we found that traditional philanthropic literature fails to address anger as a legitimate emotional driver of giving, while activism literature often fails to suggest charitable giving to nonprofits as a legitimate form of activism. And Rage Philanthropy seems to be uniquely situated between three phenomena. One is media convergence, which describes how information flows across several different platforms, print, broadcast, online, and how people like you and I are now in this dual role of media consumers and media producers thanks to these integrated platforms. Activism, which are the efforts to bring about political and social change. And philanthropy, a word that comes from ancient Greek, which means in the simplest terms, a love of humanity. So existing academic literature has explored individual intersections between these three things. For example, we have crisis philanthropy, which shares the urgency of activism and the generous giving of traditional philanthropy, especially after like a natural or man-made disaster. We have Slacktivism, which is a form of activism that occurs online only across the participatory culture of modern media. And viral crowdfunding campaigns like that of the 2004 ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, which again, we see that traditional feel-good philanthropy that leverages the speed, scale, and participation of the modern media landscape. And it's here in the center where Rage Philanthropy resides, where public dissent, private support, and modern media are converging. So to close, I'd like to share this quote from one of our study participants. They said, rage giving is so much more complicated than that, you know? It's pithy, it's fun to throw out there, but it's not completely accurate. So the debate continues. Is rage giving here to stay? Is it good to donate angry? Is rage the really motivating force behind this type of giving? Is this even anything new? In the accounts from our study participants, I'd say so. Rage philanthropy is subversive, it's disruptive, it's powerful, and there's still so much to learn. So that being said, my next study will narrow its focus in the hopes of understanding individuals who donated out of protest. So if my talk resonates with you or makes you think of someone you know, political leanings aside, I'd love to hear their story about how philanthropy was a form of protest. So here is an email address, donation.study@colorado.edu, so you could learn more, or come and see me after the show and we can talk. Much love to my friends Chris and Patricia. About 2 years ago, I was sitting in where you are, just listening and having a great time, and now I'm on stage sharing my academic pursuits, so be careful, your friends just might believe in you and do this to you as well. So anyway, thank you everyone, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Melanie. That was awesome. Now it's halftime.
It's halftime.
Feel free to take a 5-minute break, grab another drink if you want one. and we're going to play a quick game between talks here. We invite you to play along on your second screen. So here's the QR code again, in case you need it. Go back in there. We will be putting forth a poll, and I'm excited to invite tonight's poet and this summer's mixed taste guest curator, Suzi Q. Smith, to join us to play the game. Suzi Q, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back, Charlie. Oh, I'm too close to that speaker. I'm going to stand over here.
I'll come stand by you. So you helped us choose this season, and I'm just curious to hear what it was like for you and how the process of curating mixed taste went.
This was incredibly fun. I'm really glad that we got to talk. You and Sarah and I spent a lot of time talking about things that we thought were important, fun, and also getting to invite a lot more friends into this mixed taste community. So you guys are in for a really, really beautiful season. We've already started it off really excitingly. Rage Philanthropy. Like, I am not going to stop thinking about this for a very long time, and I'm really excited to learn more about apples. So these are things that I'm already very into on brand. Last season I gave a talk on artivism, so I feel like this is like connected very much to what I do, and getting to invite some of my homies to speak is pretty exciting too.
Well, it's a great lineup, and we're so grateful to you for being a part of it and for collaborating with us. But now you're here to do something that you're not good at,
Correct.
Which is to play a game that we are going to call Quite a Racket. So here's how it works. We have 8 random objects that I chose from my house this morning with the help of my kids. And you are going to help us choose which ones we are going to play a game of ping pong with and use to replace our rackets or our paddles. So the choices are, and you can start to vote now, a stuffed animal unicorn, an inner tube, a ukulele, an umbrella, and I hope you're not superstitious because we may open it inside, a boot, a rain boot, a banana, a stool, or a VHS of Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles. So please go into your second screen, vote for your favorites. This is a ranked choice. We're going to choose 4 to have a very quick game with and see what happens, all right? So let's see the results as they come in. Please put in your votes now. We'll see which ones rise to the top. All right. We have 132 votes in already, and it's a tight race. Oh, Blazing Saddles is rising. But I think our 4 have been selected for us. We have ukulele. Stuffed unicorn. Okay, stuffed unicorn. Great. Blazing Saddles and banana. Okay, so here's how we're going to do. We're going to do 2 rounds, and we're going to determine which is the best paddle, racket, whatever you want to call it, to win in ping pong. Oh, and where are the balls? Here are the balls. Thank you, Suzi. Of course. Okay, so Suzi, do you want unicorn or
I very much do. Yes. There is
banana?
no or.
So first round, unicorn versus banana. We're going to do a quick practice just so we can get used to our rackets here.
Okay,
and then we'll play 1 point. The winner will be the best paddle. Ready?
Okay. Oh,
okay. All right, good.
Okay.
Got the hang of it. All right, here we go.
All right.
At this point, winner takes all. All right. That's a win for banana.
Okay.
So this is our first winner. All right.
Okay.
Choose your weapon.
Here's what we're
Ukulele
doing.
or Mel Brooks?
I'm gonna go ukulele.
Okay. You can start this
Okay.
one. We'll do a
Now
practice
I'm ready.
round.
Okay.
This is actually kind of easy, but it was funny, so I had to include it. Okay.
I feel a little more athletic now that I've taken off my shoes. I feel like this gives us
All
a
right.
fighting chance. Okay.
So this is our practice round.
Yes.
Go
okay.
ahead. Oh, man. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Wait,
It makes good sounds, though. We
That
got
was
lots of
fun.
balls because
Okay,
I thought
thank
they
you.
would fly.
There. Okay.
Okay, this is the point. And the
Okay.
winner of this is going to play against Banana for the finals.
All right. We can do this.
All right.
Alas.
We've narrowed it down.
Okay.
We've got Blazing Saddles versus Banana.
Okay. I'm gonna go Blazing Saddles. I feel like that's a fair
All right.
chance. Okay.
I had a turn with Banana.
Okay. I'm saving it for the win. Is what I
Okay.
want. That's.
You need a practice? You want to
I
practice?
would love a practice.
Okay. Good practice. You want to serve?
No, I would love for you to serve.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
This is it for the finals. Banana versus Blazing Saddles. Oh!
I give you Blazing Saddles. Thank you.
Would you like to eat the banana?
I would love for you to.
Okay, there you go. All right.
Thank
well,
you
that
all so
concludes our
much.
game. Thank you, Suzi. Thank you, audience, for voting. This is actually a very good banana. Suzi, we will see you back after the show, after the Q&A for your poem, which is always a highlight. For those of you here in the ballroom, as we clean up, I want to tell you about our partnership with Tattered Cover Bookstore. You may have seen the books in the back. We've partnered with Tattered Cover. We've gotten recommendations of topics, of book titles from our speakers and from the booksellers at Tattered Cover. And each week there will be a new round of books related to the topics that you can purchase here. You can also buy them online through the Tattered Cover's website. And we're calling it Mixed Taste Reads. There's a great selection of books, and the best part is that a portion of the sales will go to support the DCPA and MCA Denver. So it's a great cause. You can go deeper if you're interested in learning more about the topics and find some great books to read this summer. All right, that concludes our halftime.
Now, on with the show.
And now I would like to introduce our next speaker, who will be teaching us about apples. Dr. Gail Volk has been a plant physiologist with the USDA ARS National Laboratory for Genetic Resources Preservation in Fort Collins for 21 years. Her interdisciplinary research program focuses on improving gene bank management for USDA's fruit collections, everything from molecular genetic approaches to cryopreservation. Please welcome Gail Volk.
Well, thanks for this wonderful opportunity. I'm excited to tell you about some of our research and some of the work we're doing on apples as part of our National Gene Bank program. There we go. So most people, when you mention apples, think of this. They're going to think of the apples in the grocery store, the ones you see every time, the ones you pick from, maybe 6 or 8 different kinds that are always there when you show up at the grocery store. This is what I think of when we talk about apples. Either the wild apples that we visited in Kazakhstan, or maybe the diversity of apples that we have in our National Gene Bank from all these different wild species, or even the historic apple orchards that are in the valley floor at Yosemite National Park. Apples are interesting. My colleagues like to joke that I pick these projects that have a lot of enthusiasm about them. I hear more stories of people who have a favorite apple tree in their grandparents' backyard that they grew up with, or that one in the park that they had a swing in, or something like that. There's a connection between people and apples. And this is my connection. Here's the tree in my parents' backyard in Oregon. It's a yellow transparent. It's a positively terrible apple to eat. It matures really easy. It's mushy early. It's mushy. It's not a good one, but it makes fabulous applesauce. And my mom actually won county fair awards with these apples when she made the applesauce. So that's my favorite, and everyone often has a favorite. And everyone might have a story to tell. One of the projects that I work with is part of the USDA, or I'm employed by the USDA, and we have a National Gene Bank program all around the country. And we have a huge apple collection. It's one of the biggest in the world, located in Geneva, New York. It's upstate New York. We've got over 2,700 different kinds of apples that are cultivars, that are grafted trees. We've also got over 3,200 seedlings of wild species of apples in this massive collection, and over 1,500 different seed accessions that were collected from wild trees all over the world. And here's a picture of the orchard. We represent 35 different species, 15 hybrid species. And most people are only familiar with the grocery store apples, which are those, that's just one species. And the other types of hybrid species may be crab apples. So you'll see those around too, but you may not know their names. This is part of a larger system within the USDA that we call the National Plant Germplasm System. It's a huge gene bank with 22 locations around the country. It's one of the biggest in the world. And here we store the genetic diversity of agriculturally important plants. We've got over 600,000 different kinds of cultivars and plants, we call them accessions, within this National Gene Bank program, representing over 15,000 different kinds of species. And these are all mostly agriculturally important crops. They're made available to research and breeding programs all over the world so that these programs can develop new disease-resistant, better-tasting, higher quality, stress-resistant varieties for future generations. And it's a way to save the varieties that may be lost. We have heritage varieties in here, we have new varieties, and we have wild species. In Fort Collins, Colorado, I work at the National Laboratory for Genetic Resources Preservation, and this houses the backup collection for our National Gene Bank. So we don't have any fields in Fort Collins, but instead we have massive cold storage facilities where we put in these seeds from these collections all over the country. So in case a hurricane comes through our Miami collection, we might have it backed up in Fort Collins for security's sake. Our facility has over 460,000 different accessions in our cold vaults. The left-hand side here is freezer storage, -18, same temperature as you have at home. And this is the way we store most of our seeds. They'll last a really long time. We predict that some of them could last hundreds of years at this condition, if we optimize their moisture content before they go in. We also store things in liquid nitrogen. We've got one of the biggest liquid nitrogen vat collections in a gene bank in the world. We've got dozens of these huge cryovats, and we keep things either in the liquid or vapor phase of liquid nitrogen. We keep some seeds that don't store well in the freezer. We also store some embryonic axes, the little embryos inside the seeds, for maybe some tropical crops. We also keep shoot tips, or pollen, or dormant buds of some of our other crops, if they aren't seed-propagated crops. An apple is one of those examples. So if we take an apple seed and store it, we can save the species and the genes inside there, but we don't actually save the cultivar, because apples are grafted. And so every apple, red delicious apple, came from the same original tree, and it's just been grafted and grafted for hundreds of years. If we wanted to save those cultivars and put them into liquid nitrogen, we can take these single node cuttings, we just take dormant branches off the tree in January, chop them into pieces, and then dry them, package them into tubes, and then slow cool them down to about -30 degrees Celsius, and plunge it into liquid nitrogen. We can then put it in our storage tanks, and we've had some apples there for over 30 years, and they're doing great. We keep pulling them out, checking them if we need to get that sample back out again for a reason. We can warm it up, we can rehydrate it, add water slowly, and then we can just graft it onto our rootstock, and you get a little plant like it's shown in the image. And that can regrow into a tree. So this is a way that we can store all these different apple varieties in our collection. We've got over 2,000 different kinds of apples from our national collection stored in liquid nitrogen in Fort Collins. It's the biggest collection stored in this form as these dormant buds in the world. And we have over 49 different kinds of species of apple, or taxa of apple, in this collection. This project has been going on since about 1988, and it was originally developed as a collaboration between Colorado State and USDA. So where do apples come from? Apples mostly originated in China. Most species are native to China, but they come from other places around the world. And this is a diagram of the world that has representative apples from different places where they have wild species. Here in the US, we have 4 species that are our native types. None of them are in Colorado. We do explorations around the world to collect this wild diversity and bring it back into our national collection. So we're protecting it and saving it for future generations. And we do this with collaborations of our partners and our partner countries. We did an exploration to Vietnam a few years ago, and we planned to go back last year. Then we planned this year. Now we're going to go next year to go back to collect these apples from the only tropical apple species, Most apples grow in the northern hemisphere or in the southern hemisphere, but in temperate regions. They need a cold hardiness period to flower. This particular apple tree is huge. It's at the top of the tropical canopy in the highlands of Vietnam, and the monkeys are eating them. They're up there climbing in the trees. It's found beside the coffee plants and the bananas and the citrus. It's amazing. It's one that we didn't have anywhere else in the world except one example that people have been sharing for years. And so we decided we're going to work with the Vietnamese partners, and they're going to conserve it in their gene bank, and we'll bring it back to ours. And now we have it available. Here's another picture of these fruit. They look like apples on the inside, but they're kind of a little bit wonky. They don't go straight up and down. They always kind of go a little sideways when you look at the core. It's just an interesting type of apple, and they use it to make alcohol in Vietnam as a native crop. Here's another place we go. We go to Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan is the home of the wild apple species that is the progenitor of the domesticated apple. The USDA sponsored trips in the 1980s and 1990s. There were 4 trips by several collectors, and they brought back these wild species to our National Gene Bank. They've currently been used in breeding programs to find new disease-resistant apples that are being incorporated into future types of apples that will be released at some point. We've gone back more recently to work with our partners in Kazakhstan to help them learn how to conserve the diversity in their wild apple species that's found in their national parks. So it's a really fun international collaboration and an opportunity to go to some amazing places with wild apples. So how did apples get domesticated? Here you see the picture of the wild species from China. The one above that with the black circle and the red apple is one of the domesticated types coming out of China. We have the green one in the middle. I don't have a pointer to show where that Seawell in Kazakhstan is. There's another lineage that looks like it comes north and goes to Russia. So Russia has a different type of of domesticated apples, a different gene pool than what we have from the European side. Those same Marl Seawell apples from Kazakhstan traveled over the Silk Route with people hundreds of years ago and moved through the Middle East. They interregressed with another wild species, Malus orientalis. They got over to Europe, and they interregressed with yet another wild species of apple. It's the European crab. From there, in the past couple hundred years, apples have moved across the ocean to the US. And these are the domesticated apples. We already had our natives. Now these are the domesticated types coming in. And this is a chart that we put together to show where the old varieties of apple, the old heritage types of apples in the United States originated from. A lot of them came as seedlings. So they came across the ocean in ships, and they got planted out all over the place, the Johnny Appleseed story. And people picked their favorites, and those got propagated. Nursery catalogs picked them up, they spread them around, they had names, and those are old varieties. And over half the old varieties in the US are those Johnny Appleseed type varieties that got eventually renamed. Most of those seeds came from the United Kingdom, but we also have varieties that came in from Russia, France, Germany, as well as some seedlings from Canada. This is an apple that shows the most common types of old cultivars that were around between 1890 and about 1905. So we went through all these old apple nursery catalogs and figured out what they were selling and what they were growing and what they were sharing. And if you look at this list, there's only a few names you're going to notice. You'll see Jonathan. That's still one that you see today. But Ben Davis, Red Astrachan, those were the big names 120 years ago. And we have modern dessert apples, and this is just an interesting slide. You can look at your favorites. Pink Lady's on here. If that happens to be Golden Delicious is here too, as well as Granny Smith. And you can see when those original crosses got made for those varieties. So even the new one on the list, the Honeycrisp one, that was a cross that happened almost 50 years ago at the University of Minnesota. So a lot of the apple varieties that we're even eating today came about from a long time ago. And these could have been seedlings, or these could have been specific crosses that breeders developed. But it's amazing that we're eating these apples that are the exact same varieties of apples that people were eating in the 1800s, like exactly the same genotypes. And I think that's a fun thing to think about. So we do genetics of apples. I'm not sharing all my data slides, but I do want to tell a little story about how we're using our national collection to help identify heritage apples in the landscape. So we've genotyped, we're doing DNA testing of the USDA collection. We did over 1,500 different named varieties in our collection. We had some varieties we had access to through the Washington State Cider Program, as well as some from Seed Savers. And we developed all these DNA panels. We're using some of these DNA panels to rebuild a pedigree of all the apples and how interrelated they all are. And that's a fun story for another day. Instead, you get the historic trees on the apple, on the landscape story. And this is some work that I did with a grad student back in 2009. And he collected from the Four Corners area of the US and found these old 100-year-old, 120-year-old trees and compared their DNA profiles to those in our National Gene Bank and was able to put names on them. And he was able to figure out what we had and what people were growing. And in fact, that information is now part of the program if you go to Capitol Reef National Park and you see all their orchards. And the names here on the right are some of the varieties that he identified that people were growing. More recently, we've been working with Yosemite National Park. They have 10 different historic orchards within the boundaries of the park. And we sampled leaves from 361 trees from within Yosemite. The trees are in Yosemite Valley. There's 3 orchards there, some in Foresta, some in El Portal, and some in Wawona. And then we identified those. Again, we're using our national collection as our reference set, and we were able to figure out the names of 117 of those trees, as well as 92 trees that we think are cultivars, but we don't know what they are. We're still working on that. Yosemite's got a problem. They have bears. And the bears like the apples. And the apple trees are in the valley, and the apple trees in the valley are next to the campgrounds. So every fall, there's a huge effort at Yosemite by park managers to go in and pick every apple and get them off those trees to discourage the bears from coming down into the campgrounds. And it's a huge deal. So we've got the bear people in the park trying to figure out how to minimize the apple trees. And we have the historic conservation folks saying, no, this is part of our heritage, this is part of the homesteads, this is important to us. These trees have been here for 120 years, and they may not be in great condition, but we should protect and save them. So we actually worked with Yosemite to try to figure out if they have old varieties that we want to make sure we protect, even if the trees die, and if we want to put those into our National Gene Bank and save them. And we're in the process of developing conservation plans for their orchards, as well as the trees within those orchards, in case we want to put them in a special place like our National Gene Bank. I've just got a few pictures here to show the Lehman Orchard up here to the upper left in black and white in 1944. Then below it, it's 2008, and the one to the right is just a couple years ago when I was there. And you can see the orchard. Most people don't think about this when they think of Yosemite, but it's really fun to go check out these orchards and what's going on the valley floor. You can also see up in the upper right what the condition of the trees are. So they're getting old. A tree is not going to live much more than 100 years maybe, and these are pushing 120, 130 years. So they're not going to be around forever, and that's where we're coming in to help them design some conservation strategies so that we can save those trees if they're critical to our American heritage. Here's another example. This is a Hutchings orchard. It's in the valley floor. It's right along the pathway to some of the waterfalls. And it's been around a long time, but it's not going to be there forever. So it's a nice conservation joint effort between the Park Service and USDA to try to find ways that we can protect our natural resources. Here's yet another one. This is the Curry Village parking lot. People park here, they're thrilled they get a parking place, and they're in the middle of an orchard. And this is one of the most historic orchard parking lots in the country. But we've got a conflict now. We've got bears in the trees, and we've got cars underneath them, and it's not a good situation. And they're trying to pick the apples. So again, we're trying to find ways that we can save our natural varieties of apples, or our heritage varieties, as well as protect our national park and keep the visitors safe. The other challenge is that a lot of these old orchards and these old trees of the landscapes are threatened. In fact, between the time that we collected our leaf samples, about 10 years ago, and we actually published the data like this past year, there was a big fire. The El Portal fire happened in 2014, and all those trees were lost that were apple trees. Thankfully, we already had their DNA samples, and we knew what those varieties were, and we knew where else in the park we could still find those varieties, and we could replace them. So that was a good success story, that we got in there ahead of time and protected what we had. There's another one called Johnny Wilson's Place. There's an orchard there, and we didn't get any DNA from those trees because they're on the other side of a river that we couldn't cross. And so we don't exactly know what's in that orchard yet. It's on our research project. So that concludes my talk for today. I want to share the names of some collaborators, and I'm hoping that this opened your eyes to some other aspects of apples other than the grocery store varieties that you often see. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. We are now going to get set up for a question and answer session. Now is the time for you to type in your questions on your phones. Here's the QR code again in case you need to get back there. And remember, if you want to be eligible to win a prize, you need to put your name along with your question. So we're going to bring up our speakers. We will take questions on both topics at the same time. And we encourage you to draw connections between Rage, Philanthropy, and apples if you can find them. And when you make a connection, or when the speakers make a connection, we will celebrate by gonging the gong. And tonight we will give a very special prize to the person who makes the best connection with their question. So please submit your questions in the Q&A tab. Don't forget to include your name, and let's get started. Also, I should say a cool feature of what we're using here is that if you like a question, you can give it a thumbs up and help push it higher on the list. So I've got on my phone here all the questions that are coming in. And let us start with a question from Sean Williams. Did you ever give your apple seedlings from the seed bank to growers in a rage to right a wrong?
We have shared our gene bank seedlings with collections, with heritage collections around the country, but I'm not sure if it would be in a rage.
Excellent. So here's a question, an anonymous question, just about rage philanthropy. Is Melinda or Bill Gates now a rage philanthropist? Very timely.
No comment. I don't know. They should participate in my next study, and I'll let you know.
I did see some headlines about them today, in fact, and a 2-year deadline when Bill can kick Melinda out, apparently, if they can't get along. So, this is a great one for both of you. Anonymous, you got to put your names in here if you want to win. Oops. What is the juiciest thing you found in your research? You can both answer that.
Go ahead.
Oh, me. Oh, gosh. You know, I think the biggest thing for me when I set out to do this, I was just looking to make recommendations for nonprofits of like when this happened to them. And I think I was really surprised at the breadth that this happened. Like, it was all kinds of nonprofits, sizes, locations, like causes, and they were all just bewildered, and like it was just so diverse. Like, I thought that they would be so pumped that all of this revenue and attention came into them, but they were also pretty beleaguered and bewildered. So I wasn't expecting negative outcomes. But they, as organizations, they were just trying to figure out, like, what the heck just happened. Yeah.
I'll be a literalist. So I work with fruit crops. So we work on hard cider, and we work on oranges and citrus. We work on grapes and genetic diversity of all these different systems, as well as ways that we can freeze and cryopreserve them in our gene bank. So they're all pretty juicy.
I love it.
All right, here's a great question from Patricia. If you cool the seeds of rage, will they sprout into donations much later? Or would you need to graft the anger onto a new idea for it to bear financial fruit? Well done.
Oh man, I feel like that's an SAT question a little bit. It's like, which train arrives first? It'll be really interesting, I think, in my next study, talking to donors themselves about what motivated them in like the heat of the moment, because I think, as one of my organizational participants said, like, nobody wakes up and thinks like, I'm going to rage donate today. It seems very spontaneous. So we've had a lot of reasons to potentially like rage donate in the last year, so I guess I'll just wait till the next one happens.
Colin asks, where can we rage donate to help apple conservation efforts in regards to climate change while being slacktivists from our living room?
Oh. I told you we'd have that question.
Yeah, totally. So where can people rage donate?
I'm not sure if it's rage donations, but there certainly are heritage apple collections around the country that accept donations and accept efforts to save these varieties from the landscape and protect them before those trees are either die naturally or go through a climate change event so they can't survive.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned in my talk 2 websites, Charity Navigator and GuideStar, which are, if you're interested in which nonprofit might best use its dollars. Those are 2 places you can check out nonprofits anywhere, not just here in Colorado.
El Rey has a related comment / question. Since apples are the forbidden fruit and the origin of sin, wouldn't apples be a perfect rage philanthropy? Well done. Here's one from Valerie. Is rage philanthropy just the modern day version of throwing rotten apples at someone you dislike?
I mean, I don't know. I think what's interesting is that folks are donating to nonprofits almost like a proxy, since they can't go to the front lines and do battle, right? And so it's like voting or you can do it from the comfort of your couch, and then the experts who really do have the expertise, more staff and resources than you do, say, like, you can't go to a protest today, could you donate instead? But you're like ticked off about something, So it's a nuance of philanthropy that you might experience in other parts if you see a sad news story, or if you just feel like donating because it's Giving Tuesday or your birthday or whatever. But yeah, I think. I hope, maybe.
There's so many good questions coming in. Sorry, I'm a little overwhelmed here. Gail, did you want to add anything?
I would just hate to see those rotten apples go to something other than hard cider.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so here's a question from Paul. What is the intersection between protecting apple varieties and those wanting to expand access to public lands? I think we could draw a connection there.
Well, a lot of public lands have apple varieties, so if you're expanding those public lands, you're protecting the apple varieties in that process. So I think they're really nicely connected.
And Melanie, has there been any rage philanthropy related to public land conservation that you're aware of?
Not in my research. I interviewed just 20 informants, so I'm sure, that doesn't mean that there aren't, they just weren't in my study.
Great. Now we do have a lot of really good questions that are not drawing connections, and I think since we have 2 really smart people here, we might as well ask some of them. So here's one. Have you explored euphoric philanthropy, and are they 2 sides of the same coin?
No, that is an unfamiliar term to me. I was actually had stumbled upon earlier this year something called the anger activism model. in activism literature, and so they're really exploring anger as a motivator for activism. And I thought, there's some parallels here. And so I'll have to, thank you so much. I'll have to look into that. There are so many different shades of philanthropy. I don't know if you folks have followed the GameStop news story as well. So folks that made bank in the GameStop stock thing then donated to animal groups, kind of to stick it even further to the man. And somebody wrote about that and called it spite philanthropy, right? So it's always evolving, and emotions are very nuanced. So I'm always keeping an eye out for the different ranges of that.
Gail, this one I think is directed at you, but Melanie, you can respond as well. It's your last meal. What apple are you choosing, and how do you want it prepared?
I want the applesauce from my mom's yellow delicious tree. That was an easy one.
That's so sweet. So
A yellow transparent tree.
Oh, what kind?
Yellow transparent, not yellow delicious. Yeah,
Yellow transparent.
So I think the best dessert is the apple crisp at Mike O'Shea's restaurant in downtown Longmont. It's apple crisp with your choice of cinnamon or vanilla ice cream. Go get you some. It's fantastic.
Here's a great one. Where did it go? From Gretchen. Shall I donate to protest both Apple's and Apple's resilience on China? Apple's lowercase and Apple uppercase. Well done. Has there been much rage philanthropy related to big tech companies?
I don't know who they're donating to. If it's one of those things that I just try to pay attention to news stories, and that's how I include into like a true rage philanthropy event. If it's just a couple folks donating because they're like ticked off, they might tell me I've done that, and then you're like, oh, okay. But is it enough that it causes that organizational like strife or something like that? So if it's happening, I'd like to know.
Is there any psychological or genetic attributes for people to continue more or are more susceptible to contribute to rage philanthropy? That's from Kira. You want me to say that again?
Sure.
Is there any psychological or genetic attributes for people to contribute more or are more susceptible to contribute to rage philanthropy?
Oh.
The genetic thing, I think, is a crossover here. So I'll give you a half gone for that, Kira.
So I don't know that there's been any studies or surveys about that specifically. I know, having worked in fundraising, that there's been a lot of like surveys of donors in the 2016 era and that kind of thing. But I don't know that they asked those specific questions. But I think that's what I could potentially find out in my next study, having just focused on the organizational experience of it, and seeing how it has affected the nonprofits. So I'm curious to see if the donors themselves would like to offer up any self-diagnosis. I don't know.
Gail, here's an anonymous question for you. Are there any new types of apples that you're really excited about?
New types. Well, there's new types coming out from breeders all the time. I think one of the big strengths in the country right now, and there's a huge amount of interest, is the cider varieties. Those are our most requested materials out of our gene bank because we can't keep up with the demand for industry and the nurseries that need this germplasm so that they can propagate it and provide it to new plantings. So there's going to be a lot more action in apple cider, hard cider, coming down the pipeline.
I love some hard cider. So here's another question for you from Lou. How many different apples can there be on a single tree?
Lots. You can graft as many branches on there as you want. I've heard of 50, 60 different kinds of apples on a tree.
Wow.
So you can just keep grafting new buds on and making a little branch of all the different kinds. So there's definitely people that do that.
That is awesome. On one tree.
Yeah.
All on one tree.
Yeah.
Amazing.
One big tree.
No big
They
deal.
do that. There are people that do that.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up with this question from Anne Marie. Teachers are often given apples instead of adequate pay. Is that rage philanthropy or sour grapes? Thank you, Anne Marie. Anything to add to that? Thank you. That was a great question and answer. Thank you, audience here and online, for your wonderful questions and connections. Thank you, Melanie and Gail. Now it's prize time. So each week, as you know, we give a prize to the person who made the best connection. And MCA Denver's digital producer, Cheyenne Michaels, who's sitting up in the booth there looking at all your questions, has chosen her favorite of the night, her favorite connection. And the winner, tonight, the winner will receive 2 free tickets to Wildfire, which is a new theatrical concert inspired by real Colorado stories from last year's East Troublesome Fire. This is a brand new play by a Colorado playwright featuring music from some of our favorite local folk musicians. It's going to tour outdoor venues across the state, starting on August 16th at Levitt Pavilion. So the winner of tonight's question will get 2 free tickets to Levitt Pavilion. And Cheyenne, I'm having trouble seeing on here the winner. But let me refresh my Google Doc, and we'll see if it shows up for me. The suspense. Here it is. The winner is Patricia, who asked, if you cool the seeds of rage, will they sprout into donations much later? Congratulations, Patricia. Are you in the audience here? Awesome. I'll find you after, or you can email offcenter@dcpa.org, and we'll hook you up with your tickets, but I'll try to find you after the show. Congratulations, excellent connection. That was awesome. So now let's invite Suzi Q. Smith back to enlighten us with an original poem inspired by tonight's talks. As you may know, Suzi Q. Smith is an award-winning artist, activist, and educator. She's also the guest curator of this summer series. Please welcome Suzi Q.
Thank you, Charlie. You all had some really, really wonderful questions tonight, and now I kind of want to go back and add those lines into this poem. So tonight's poem's title is inspired by the drink special. I shifted it slightly. Apples are the all-American rage is our title this evening. So bear with me as I scribble through it, because I did write this live backstage. So, spreading seeds as an act of goodwill, an act of protest. To imagine that any act is apolitical is to unknow the impact of a bruise, inpouring, flooding a movement for a moment. Have you ever seen a mudslide, trying to find footing in its midst? Is it easier to survive than a desert? What conditions will lead to growth? Which mouthfuls make us home, make us human? After the rain, we are as before, here, learning the art of patience with growth. Should we thank the ones who hate us for inspiring others to empathy? Is empathy enough when it is unexpected, unknown, emotional, unsolicited? What is protest if not an act of goodwill? Isn't money always political? Doesn't all action include at least a little heat? Isn't rage been in response to profound, weighted love? Isn't love a legacy we hope takes root? Haven't soft apples always been perfect for sauce and throwing? Does philanthropy too go dormant? Does rage? When we learn to look closely, the seeds and soil tell stories. Remember our grandmothers' names. This is our heritage, a way to preserve legacy. Some legacies sow hatred, reaping mouths full of rot. Sometimes they even grow up to be president. That's just one species. Everyone has a favorite apple tree. Apples are native to China, but don't we call them quintessentially American? Isn't that American too? Maybe the true story is wilder, rounder, more varied than the conversations we have allowed. How much are we still not talking about? And with so many varietals we have yet to know, with histories and ancestry longer than we can imagine. And of course, this too is America. Thank you. And please welcome back Charlie.
Suzi Q. Smith. Never ceases to amaze me, the insight that comes from these poems. Thank you so much, Suzi. And thank you to our presenting sponsor, Blue Room. Blue Room is a private investment company born of invention, forward thought, and hope. Through best-in-class investing, they create space to amplify the power of human togetherism. Togetherism means together we can accomplish anything. So thanks to Blue Room for supporting this programming. Thank you, Melanie and Gail, our speakers tonight. And thanks to you all for joining us. Please take a moment on your phones to fill out the survey. This is new technology for us. We're still figuring out what works, what doesn't work. So your feedback is really helpful and we appreciate it. And we'll be right here next week where we will be talking about Dr. Justina Ford and the banjo. So we hope to see you there. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.